So in this video, I'm going to give you tips on how to prepare for your trip to Cancun. And this is not just for first timers. This video is going to be useful for someone even like me who's been to Cancun over 20 times. And if you are new to my channel, 3 days and tres noches, I bring you honest resort reviews, travel tips and information about the destinations that I go to and show you can have an amazing vacation in a really short amount of time. First, let's talk about the entry requirements to get into Cancun. And as one of the most traveled tourist destinations in the world, they make it very easy for you to get into Cancun because the only requirement is a passport, a valid passport. So there are no more paper forms. A lot of people ask me about those FMM forms. They are no longer a thing. There's no COVID test. There's nothing. All you need is a valid passport. If you don't have a passport yet, then make sure you give yourself plenty of time to get one because it can take 6 months or sometimes even more for you to get that passport. Another great thing about Mexico in general is that they do not have the 6-month expiration requirement on passports. So a lot of European countries, your passport has to be valid for at least 6 months. So it can't expire within 6 months for you to enter their country. So this is a good time to check those expiration dates on your passports anyway. But for Mexico, as long as your passport is valid during your stay, then they will allow entry. Definitely get one of these passport holders that hangs around your neck. That way the passports are really easy to access, especially if you're traveling with multiple people and you're responsible for multiple passports. So while we're talking passports, something that has come to my attention over the last few years is that it's really important for some people to get their passport stamped when they go through immigration. So when you travel internationally, usually the first place you go when you get off the plane is immigrations, and you go through a booth, you talk to an immigration officer, and they are going to stamp your passport. Well, in Cancun over the last few years, they've gotten e-gates, which makes it a lot quicker to go through immigrations. But if you choose to go through the e-gates, you do not get your passport stamped. So if that's really important to you, make sure you choose the staffed immigration lines. Now, I do an entire video about the Cancun airport. In fact, I do several videos about the Cancun airport. So make sure you check those out. I'm not going to go into many Cancun airport tips here because there's just too many to cover, and I go through those in those other videos. While we're talking about the airport, I do want to mention a few things. Again, the experience can be a little bit overwhelming. So just by watching some of those videos, you can relieve so much stress. You can avoid making mistakes that I've made. But one of the biggest tips I always give is just make sure you arrange that transportation from the airport to the resort ahead of time. So how do you do that, and what are the different transportation options at the airport? Well, I always go for the private transportation. It costs the most, but for me, it's the most reliable, it's the safest, it gets me to my destination the quickest way possible. And if you follow me, you guys know I always use Nacho Tours. I don't get anything for recommending him. He's just a personal friend of mine. So I will put his information in the description below, but there's lots of different companies out there that provide private transportation. Just make sure you always do your research and make sure you're getting a reputable company. Now, another thing you could do is shared transportation. So a lot of resorts will offer free transportation from the airport to the resort, and that sounds amazing, right? Well, that's usually a shared option. So what that means is that you have to wait for everyone else to get off their flights that are also taking that shuttle to the resort. So that can usually add at least an hour to your trip. So that's why I usually just pay a little bit more and get the private transportation. And of course, it has the typical options of any airport, like getting a taxi, which I would never do in Cancun. In fact, I did that the first time, I got scammed. There's just so many different ways that you can be taken advantage of by the taxis. Now, some people swear by Uber, which I personally would never do as well because there is this kind of battle between the Ubers and the taxis. And I don't want to get entangled in that. And then there is a more budget-friendly option called the ADO bus. Now, again, I personally have never taken it, but I think you can get into Cancun for like $10, $11, Playa del Carmen for like 20 something. But a few things with that is, one, you do have to part with your luggage. So you would have to put it in the undercarriage, which I would never do in Cancun or any tourist destination. And then they're just gonna drop you off at a bus stop. So then you do still have to find transportation from there to your resort. And again, make sure you watch all of the videos that I've done on the Cancun airport. It's going to help you prepare so much. It can be a little bit of an overwhelming experience, so it's going to help you avoid mistakes and just start your vacation in a much less stressful way. The more I travel, the more of a planner that I become, because I have found that the more I plan, the better my trip goes. So I actually created the ultimate travel planner. You can find this on my website, 3days3noches.com. So that's the number 3 days, the number 3noches.com. And I have free checklists that you can download. This is only $4.99 that you can download and print out, and you can research, journal, and plan your vacations all in one spot. So this really has a lot of great tips and things that you can do 90, 60, 30 days out. So I will highlight just a few of those here in this video that I think are really important, actually probably valid for any trip that you're gonna take, not just to Cancun. And one of those is to make digital copies of your passport and ID. So just in case, God forbid, something happened to those documents while you were traveling, at least you have digital copies, which might help you recover physical ones a little bit more quickly. Another important tip is do not use debit cards when you are in Cancun. So you can certainly bring one, but make sure you have credit cards, because in case your information is stolen, God forbid again, it's a lot easier to report fraud versus a debit card where they have access to your bank account. One of the biggest mistakes I think people make when they go to a place like Cancun is that they overpack. So if you follow me, you know I always say just do a carry-on, don't even check in a bag for so many different reasons. But also, you don't need a lot of stuff. You're going to a warm climate, you can repurpose items. And so you can fit everything that you need in a carry-on. So in my travel planner, I also have a really great packing list, which you can download the packing list by itself for free, so that it can help you to avoid to overpack, but make sure that you bring some essential items. I would say the top 3 things that people might forget when they're packing. One is an SPF shirt. So that's something that I will not travel without. I actually use the hoodie like it's a jacket, and you can use it on the beach, by the pool. You can use it on excursions, and I even use it at night sometimes as a little jacket. Insulated mugs are also a must. If you're going to an all-inclusive resort, you're gonna keep filling up on drinks and it's hot, so the ice keeps melting. So make sure you bring those insulated mugs. And then you wanna also bring rain gear. You're going to a tropical climate, so no matter what time of year that you're going to go, most likely it will rain at least a little. Again, check out that packing list, because there's a lot more items on here that you probably might not have thought of that's going to help make your trip a lot better. Another thing that I do that really seems to help my trip go a lot more smoothly is I try to learn as much about the resort as I can before arriving. So especially if it's a bigger resort, I try to learn about the layout, because sometimes it takes you an entire day just to figure out where everything is. So I will go onto the website or see if there is a map, a resort map, and try to look at it and just kind of get a feel for where everything is. Often these resorts also have apps, so I will download the app. I will look at, the different restaurants and the menus and the activities, and just try to get a feel for some of the things I might want to do. Again, I'm only traveling usually for 3 days and 3 noches, so I usually can't get to everything at the resort. So I want to plan ahead and see what things I want to do, what restaurants I want to hit. And even though you usually can't make reservations ahead of time, you can at least look at the menus and see which restaurants you definitely want to go to. Another really good tip is that most of these resorts have private Facebook groups, and they have priceless information in there. So try to research to see if yours has one, join it, and you will learn so much about the resort, especially the restaurants, activities, little hidden gems that maybe no one knows about. So definitely look for those Facebook groups. Now, another thing I like to do about 2 weeks ahead of time is to call the resort and try to talk to a live person, confirm my reservation, ask about upgrade options, and just ask them in general if there's anything that I need to know before arriving. Now, if you're working with a travel agent, I guess you really don't need to do this, but I do it anyway, just because I do like to connect with that live person. I even ask them if they're working that day, and if they are, you have like this special connection when you get there. And sometimes you might get a little special upgrade or a little perk here and there, but other times I actually learn things about the resort that I'm glad to know before arriving. Now, one thing you can usually arrange ahead of time, actually two things you can arrange ahead of time. One is the spa. Now, I usually don't take advantage of the spa. I think usually the prices are outrageous, but you definitely want to probably reserve spa services ahead of time because those book up quickly. Now, I usually always like to try at least the hydrotherapy, so I will research that, if it's included, how much it is, and if we need to make reservations ahead of time. Now, another thing you can schedule ahead of time, which I highly recommend doing, are excursions. So another great thing about Cancun is that there are so many things to do. And I know Cancun gets a bad rap. People say it's dangerous and the safety is an issue, but I've been there so many times, I've never had an issue. However, I do understand why some people are nervous about going off the resort. So excursions are an amazing way to do this safely because usually it's in an organized group. Now you can arrange this through the resort, which I've done before, but now I usually just do it through viator.com. It's an app that you can download. It's a sister company to TripAdvisor, and I'm actually a partner with them, but I've been using them for so many years. So I was really excited when they came to me and offered a partnership because I just love the services that they offer. And one of the things that I love is that you can do a search. You can look through the reviews, you can read the reviews, and lots of times you can book now and pay later. They have a flexible cancellation policy, and you can also earn rewards. So every time you book with them, you earn rewards towards other trips. Now, if you would like some suggestions on which excursions to take, go to my website, 3days3noches.com. I have a whole section on excursions. I have videos on them, and I also have links to book. Another great thing about Cancun is that most people speak English, so you don't have to worry about learning Spanish. However, I would still learn at least some basic words because it's always fun and just out of respect, being able to communicate with the employees, whoever you come into contact, even if it's hola, adios. And in fact, I do 2 or 3 different beginning Spanish videos, so check those out if you want to just learn some basic phrases. Another thing that comes up about Cancun is people tend to get sick, especially in their stomachs. So I think everyone knows not to drink the water when you're in Cancun. A lot of people ask me about the ice. Resorts use filtered water to make ice, of course, or all of their guests would be getting sick. So the other thing too you might want to consider is starting a probiotic or something along those lines before you go to Cancun, because what happens is people are going to these all-inclusive resorts and they're overindulging and eating and drinking. And I mean, who wouldn't? That's the point of an all-inclusive resort. So if there's anything that you can do in advance to kind of prep your body for that, it might help. Probiotics are a little bit tricky because there's so many different ones out there. So just make sure you do your research. You really look into it before actually taking one. And I know I keep plugging all my videos, but I can't help it because I actually do one about how to avoid getting sick. And I give you some of my wellness and holistic tips on how to do that. And all of the videos that I mentioned will be in the description below. A lot of people also ask me about if they should exchange their US dollars to pesos or their Canadian dollars to pesos. And you really don't need to, because both are widely accepted. Now, I do get some comments that it's disrespectful not to use the currency of the country and that we should be exchanging money. Now, I have tried it a few times. It's just really confusing for me. And I find I'm trying to figure out the exchange and all of those types of things. And I've also checked with several of the employees in the resorts, and they say, no, they're happy to get the US dollars. And then it's usually worth more, and then they can just go to their bank and exchange it. And while we're talking money, make sure you bring money to tip. Now, I know this is an all-inclusive resort, but often the employees do not get paid, very high hourly wages, and they rely on those tips. So even $1 goes a really long way to these employees that work really hard to make your vacation better. So I usually budget around $20 to $50 a day, but honestly, anything that you can give them, they will appreciate. And of course, I do a whole video about tipping. A lot of people also ask me about cell phone usage and if their cell phone will work in Cancun, and this is something you have to find out through your provider. I use Verizon, and now actually it's included in my unlimited plan. Mexico's included, but in the past I think it was like $10 a day for me to be able to use my phone, and I really never had an issue. A lot of the resorts also have Wi-Fi, so you can hook up to that and use your phone that way. You will also want to download the airline app and make sure you have the latest updated version for especially when you're departing from the Cancun airport. That way you can get your boarding pass, you can get the latest updates. A lot of people ask me how early they should arrive to the Cancun airport when they are departing, and it really depends on so many different factors. I would say, 2 to 3 hours, depending if you have to check in a bag, what time of day it is, what time of year. I never check in a bag, so I usually can get there an hour and a half in advance and still have plenty of time. But again, just kind of depends on the time of day. Now, your transportation company might say something like 5 hours in advance. So you can actually make the final call of when you want to arrive to the airport. But again, just make sure you give yourself plenty of time. And of course, I do a whole video about departing from the Cancun airport. And of course, if you have any tips that you can add, please drop them in the comments section below. I do try to respond to all comments and questions. And I am so close to 30,000 subscribers, so please consider subscribing or sharing this video with a friend if you found it helpful. And keep following me at 3 Days and Tres Noches.